ServSafe Chapter 5. You may notice that I do not have a green screen. That's because I am rearranging the office today, but I will still have graphics up, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently. Let me know if you like it better this way or if you like the green screen better. Anyways, today we're going to be covering Chapter 5, which is the flow of food. This includes purchasing, receiving, and storage. The rule of thumb, or one of the good things to remember here, is that you can keep safe food safe, but you generally can't make unsafe food safe. There are a couple ways that you can kind of fudge this a little bit, which are still within the bounds of ServeSafe Manager that we'll get into in a different video. Generally speaking, if you drip raw beef on a bunch of muffins, it's better to throw them away than to try and cook out the, potential contaminants. Because as I talked about in the case study in the last video, 2 people died and 68 people got sick because of this exact thing happening. All because of storage. Just storage. Something as simple as storage can totally change things. Now, in one of the beginning videos, one of the things that I had said was repeatedly I mentioned something about getting product from reputable vendors. I made the joke about not buying fish, from a dude in the alley. These mistakes can happen, and the way they might happen is a simple situation like you want to support local vendors instead of going through like US Food Cisco or Benny Keith or whatever. And so you go through a local greenhouse or you go through a local butcher or whatever, and there's a chance that just because they're local doesn't necessarily mean that they have the best quality. So you need to make sure to check them out and make sure they're a good quality. Get some beef in, have a family meal or whatever, test it out. Now with alcohol, it's even more strict. There is a lot of extremely strict regulations on that. So if these suppliers for your food have been inspected, they can show you an inspection report. The inspection report should include the following: receiving and storage, processing, shipping, cleaning and sanitizing, personal hygiene, staff training, recall program, and a HACCP program or other food safety system. HACCP stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points. So generally speaking, beyond that, something else that you can do is making sure that you don't do a key drop if that is something that is interesting. If you trust them and they're reputable, but you can end up with a lot of problems doing the key drop. It's more convenient for the suppliers, but it's less convenient for you if you end up with product that you can't use. Some places will have you literally temp everything out when it comes off the truck. That means taking a thermometer and temping out the sour cream and making sure that it is below the temperature danger zone. And if it's above that, rejecting it, getting a credit for it, or getting a replacement for that. The driver may not like you rummaging through all of the stuff to make sure that it is good quality. Establishing a relationship with the vendor and the driver and doing this kind of thing can actually end up being really positive in the long run. Honestly, the driver can go suck lemons if he's got a problem with it. Like, would you rather minorly inconvenience a driver while they wait for you to inspect everything before you sign the paperwork? Or would you rather get a bunch of people sick because Mr. Driver was too impatient and he had to get to his next stop because he was screwing around and now he's late? You should have very specific people in charge of doing the truck, whether that is certain people in charge on certain days, or one person is always in charge, or you as the manager are doing it. Whatever you do, you want to have consistency in this, because one of the issues, you can end up with multiple issues if you do this incorrectly. And that is some rando just signs the thing and the truck driver leaves, but then you find out that the order is missing something, or you find out that the sour cream is hot to the touch when you get it, or you found out that all of the salmon, sometimes they'll take ice and they'll put it on the salmon fillets. And sometimes that ice will be super melted, especially down in Texas where it's we've gone 68 days straight in 100-degree weather. So it's extremely important to temp this stuff out. You never know. And it may not be the fault of the driver. It could just be that things are extremely hot, things got mishandled, whatever. But in any case, you need to be able to look at that in order to fix the problems. This also will prevent situations where you have somebody that is doing it that you don't have, say you don't have somebody in charge of taking in the order. Bob may not know how to check the order in correctly. He should be trained on that, yeah, but regardless, if he doesn't know, he doesn't know. So having somebody there all the time that knows how to do this and knows what to do is obviously a good thing. You should also be providing the staff with anything they need to do the job. This includes thermometers, scales, product lists, order guides, whatever you need to give them so they have the tools, like set them up for success is essentially what I'm trying to say. Make sure things are inspected immediately. This is why I said key drops can be a problem, because if they show up at 4:30 and the first person doesn't get there till 8 in the morning, or even 6, it's 2 and, whatever, they get here at 6:30. 2 hours that food sat there. So by the time you get to it, even if you're inspecting it, some of that stuff could have gone into the danger zone at that point. And then it's, maybe not necessarily their fault for having a key drop. Just, key drops, I'm not demonizing key drops. They do have their place, and they can be really convenient, and they can be awesome, but it also gives the drivers leeway to kind of just do whatever they want. And that may mean there was one place that I was working for that they had a key drop in place. We would come in, all the refrigerated goods were in the prep area on the floor, just sitting there. They didn't even wheel it into the walk-in and put it there. They don't have to put it away, but they didn't put it into the walk-in to keep it cool. So it's like, well, how long has 160 pounds of beef been sitting on the fucking prep kitchen floor? When you are putting away the truck, you want to start with the refrigerated items first, then move to the frozen stuff, and then do the dry stuff. That's because the frozen stuff is further away from the temperature danger zone. So you put the fridge stuff away first, because that would be the most likely to have the time temperature abuse. Next, you do the frozen goods, and then dry storage is obviously it's okay at room temp, so then you can put that away as you need to. I was talking about key drops extemporaneously, but they actually cover key drops in the book, and they list out a few things. So here's that list really quick. From an approved source, placed in the correct storage location to maintain required temperature, protected from contamination in storage, hasn't been contaminated, and is honestly presented. When you reject something, make sure you get a signed adjustment or credit slip before giving it back to them. Then you're also going to want to have a place where you can log this kind of stuff. Then you can write, rejected the strawberries, they were covered in mold, or whatever the case may be. Now, it is important to monitor recall notices. I was working in a kitchen that actually had romaine that had come from one of the affected areas back in the day. This was like quite a few years back, but a bunch of romaine was contaminated. We had to go through all of our romaine. We had to check everything. We had to look at, specific serial numbers, and there's like a whole process for this. Usually when there's a recall notice, they will give you the information you need. You don't just need to go pulling all of your romaine. For example, if you are getting romaine from the same vendor where the recall notice was from, then even then, there's batches. That's why there's like batch numbers. There's all kinds of numbers that are involved with the product that you get. And matching up those numbers will be the important factor in trying to identify whether or not this particular romaine is part of the recall or not. Make sure that you remove this from the inventory. Place it wherever. Usually it's best to have a dedicated place to put this stuff. Make sure that you make it very conspicuous and obvious that you are not to use this product. Write do not use in big black Sharpie all over the box. If you have do not use labels, or, you have a designated area that has caution tape and, it's very obvious, like, hey, do not pull anything from this shelf. This is all crap that's going back. The book actually suggests using like a big red piece of paper with black letters that say do not use. Now, within the recall notice, they will also tell you what to do with it. Some vendors will take it back. They actually physically want the product back. Other times they'll be like, look, if you have it, just throw it away. So it just depends. So when you are temping food, anything that you can get to as far as chicken or whatever, like you get a case of chicken in. Now, most of the time they will have loose bags in there. The chicken will be packaged in these kind of, they're about grocery bag size, but they're not like tied or sealed. Sometimes they are, which then you'll have to do this a little bit differently. But if they're open, you can grab a chicken breast and put it in the thickest part of the chicken, make sure it's up to temp. Now, when it comes to burger meat, when it comes to like logs of beef, you're actually not supposed to stick the probe directly through the packaging and puncture the packaging in order to take the temp. What they recommend that you do is you take the probe and you put it between two logs, like where the logs are touching, put it between them and check the temperature there. Now, when it comes to other packaged items like sour cream, you're going to want to temp those out as well. But again, do not puncture through the lid and the safety thing. You're going to have to just open one and temp it out. And then you're probably going to end up using that anyway, but you're not supposed to have the thermometer touch the edges or the packaging itself, only the food item. So what are the temperatures that you can accept things at? TCS food, 41 degrees or lower. Live shellfish can be 45, but the temperature of the actual shellfish should not be greater than 50, and you need to cool it down below 41 degrees right away as soon as you get it. Shucked shellfish, you can receive that at 45 degrees. Again, cool it down to 41 or below. Specifically, when I say 41 or below, you need to do this within a 4-hour time frame. Milk can be received at 45 degrees. Again, cool to below 41 within 4 hours. Shell eggs, guess what? You can receive them at 45 degrees, cool them to 41 within 4 hours. Hot TCS food, receive at 135 degrees or greater. I've never received hot food. We've always cooked it in-house. So, I mean, let me know in the comments. Have you ever received hot food? I've never received hot food. Maybe they're referring to like catering and like deliveries for hot food, like banquet style stuff, maybe. Now, frozen foods are actually very particular in how you should accept them and when you should reject them. Now, the food that you get should be absolutely frozen solid. If you see any fluid or water stains at all on the packaging, you're technically supposed to reject it. Now, this actually appeared on my ServSafe Manager test. This next one did. So make sure you keep a heavy eye on this because it may come up once, maybe even twice or more. Essentially, if you see ice that is collected around the outside of the packaging, it could be evidence that the food was thawed out and then refrozen, and you don't know how long that food was thawed out for. Since this is an indication of possible time temperature abuse, you're better off rejecting it and getting your credits. Now, obviously, anything that you get that is not like food, like if you're getting plastic cups, for example, as long as the package isn't torn and they look like they're in good enough condition, then you're good to go. Now, with cans, there are a ton of reasons that you can reject cans. Obviously, dents being a big one. Rust is another reason. Any visible sign of leaking, if the ends seem like they're swollen or bulging. It's never happened to me in like the 20 years I've been cooking, but that doesn't mean that it won't eventually happen somewhere. There was one time where we opened up a can of crushed tomatoes, and that can was solid black. It was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. And it was only one can, but we rejected the whole case because you never know. We don't know if maybe there was a hole somewhere and air had gotten in right after the packaging process. But in any case, yeah. So that definitely can happen. Missing labels is another one. If you get any cans and there's no labels on it, just send it back. If you receive any items that are ROF, which is reduced oxygen, reduced oxygen food, basically. ROE, reduced oxygen environment, is another way of putting it. If you get anything like that and the package looks like it is bloated or it looks like it's leaking, you're supposed to reject that as well. And then obviously like broken cartons and things that look discolored in any way. Things that like, you just get vibes, right? You're just like, the vibes are off, just send it back. You're better off. You're better off just sending it back and dealing with the short-term thing instead of somebody potentially getting sick. And even if they don't get sick, the food could potentially just taste nasty. Any items that have an expiration date or use-by date that is missing, you need to reject those as well as any packages that you get at all of any kind of food item, cups, whatever, if there's any signs of pests, and that includes, like chewing from like mice, or if you see like droppings or anything like that. Now, there are two types of dates. There is the sell-by date and there is the best-by date. These are two different dates. The sell-by date is something the grocery store uses, that they have to pull it off the shelf if they do not sell it by this date. It's not necessarily the day that the food is going to go rotten. However, most times restaurants will use the sell-by date to say like, well, if we can't sell this to a customer by this day, we can't cook this food and use it by this day either. As a consumer, if the sell-by date is tomorrow and you buy it, you've just now removed it off the shelf, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. The best by date is literally the date where they feel like the quality will be the best, and any days after that, you risk reducing the quality. And that means the flavor might start to go off, things might start to look a little gray and gross. Now, I want to talk a little bit about shellfish. There is a very specific procedure that you need to go through when it comes to mussels and clams and stuff like that, and I'll explain why here in a second. Most shellfish, pretty much all shellfish, will have something called a shell stock tag. This shows you, this tag is basically the address of where that shellfish came from. If they do not have this tag, it may not be from a reputable source. Now, obviously, there's times where things could fall off, but generally speaking, if you don't have a shell stock tag, it's probably not a good thing. Best practice, do not remove the shell stock tag from the container until you're done with it. Don't do anything with it. Don't throw it away or whatever. Don't do any of that. There's been times where I've received shellfish and stuff like that before, and when I was newer, I didn't really know about that kind of stuff. But then after I learned about it, what I started doing is I would even take a picture of it, and I would make sure to tag the picture on what exactly it was a picture of and the date, and all that kind of stuff. In case one of the cooks or whoever got a hold of the package removed that tag, then I would at least still have a reference point for that. Now, sushi grade will have documentation saying that it's sushi grade. The reason why you want sushi grade but as opposed to anything else is because sushi grade indicates that it is actually free from parasites. One of the biggest mistakes I see people do when they're making sushi is they will just go to the store and they will just buy salmon. They'll just buy whatever salmon. Not sushi grade salmon, just salmon that's just packaged and chilling. If it's not sushi grade, you have no idea what is in that salmon, and you could get a parasite, and it could be bad. Like, it could be really bad. Now, they say that poor food quality can be a sign of time and temperature abuse. I feel like that's not really something you should have to have in a ServeSafe Manager book. Like, obviously, if you get the food and the food's rotten, it was probably abused, right? But that is something that's in the book. You are going to look for things like appearance, odor, things that smell bad. Chicken will start getting like a deep yellow to it when it starts to get rotten. When you push in on chicken, it'll leave an imprint. It won't the meat won't be very springy. Chicken normally will be a little bit slimy, but it'll be like overly slimy, almost like a sticky slimy. And it can also be really dry. Anything like that, just get your credits. Now, labeling. So as far as labeling goes, the general rule of thumb is if it is not in its original container, it needs a label. Something that most people may not know, which is kind of like a minor thing, but if the product is really easily recognizable, you don't actually have to write what it is. Like, you have to write a date, but potatoes, for example, if you have a Cambro full of potatoes, everybody in the world knows what a potato looks like. Well, 99% of people know. I find it hard to believe that there are people out there who don't know what potatoes look like. But anyways, you put the potatoes in a Cambro. You don't have to write potatoes, 9-2 or whatever. You just have to write the date. So when you are packaging food for retail, you have to have a lot of things in there. You need to have a list of most of the allergens. You need to have an ingredient list, and preferably you need a whole ingredient list, and that ingredient list should actually be by weight. So if you have a chicken salad, chicken would be on the top, lettuce would be further down. You need to have the date it was created. You need to have an expiration date on it. You need to have a list of artificial colors, chemical preservatives, the name of the place of the business, the manufacturer, the distributor, etc. Like we do, where I currently work, we actually have a grab and go section, and we use a menu pilot. And we have to type in, the price, what the item is, the allergens, the ingredient list, like all of that stuff. So as we know, refrigeration slows the growth of bacteria. Now, you can have TCS ready to eat food unmarked for a short period of time, but if it's going to be more than a day, it needs to be marked. And you can't hold it for more than 7 days or you have to throw it out. And obviously, this is with the caveat that it's being held at 41 degrees or lower. So if you make macaroni salad on October 1st, you count the day it was made. You made macaroni salad on the 1st, that's day 1. Now, it is not specified that you absolutely have to mark it with October 1st, but you have to pick one. You can either say this was made on October 1st, or you can say throw this away on October 7th, or you can say both. But ServeSafe Manager does not indicate that you 100% have to have October 1st and 7th written at the same time. It's kind of up to the business on how they want to track that. Also, when you are going to make something such as, we'll say jambalaya, what you do when you are making something with multiple ingredients is you have to take the ingredient that's going to go bad first. That's going to be what your expiration date or your use by date is. So if something has a shelf life of 7 days, something else has a shelf life of 10 days, and you combine them, then the shelf life is now for 8 days. Make sure that you are not overcrowding your walk-in cooler or your freezer because it prevents airflow and can end up causing a lot of problems later on down the line. You're not actually supposed to line shelves with anything. Like some places will put like foil or something down on them. The reason why that there are like grates, the shelving is like wires going across essentially, is because you want that extra airflow getting up underneath it. Food needs to be rotated while it's in there. You want to have the oldest stuff be used first and the newer stuff obviously be used last. Say it with me now. FIFO. First in, first out doesn't mean that if you have a case of chicken today and you put that in first, you take that chicken out and use it first, and then there's other chicken in there. That's not what that means. That means the first thing that went in general, ever, gets used first. So at the beginning of the week, you have a case of chicken that goes in there, and maybe you pull a bag or whatever out of it. Then the next day, you get another box of chicken, and the next day, you get another box of chicken. The first box was the one that was there on Monday. And that's the one you need to finish. Then you do the one on Tuesday, then you do the one on Wednesday, etc., etc., etc. Often into infinity. This is called rotation. If things are out of rotation, people can get sick. A lot of bad things can happen. What's going to end up happening more often than not, what really ends up happening is you end up throwing a case of chicken away because somebody keeps not rotating the stock and they just keep taking the new chicken that they get off the truck and putting it on top of Monday's chicken and then taking it out. That is something that a lot of lazy cooks will do. So you really got to make sure that's make sure whatever system in place, it's being monitored. You know, keep things marked. Make sure that when someone's putting stuff away, they have dates on when it was received. That's why those dates are there, is because you can look and be like, well, this says October 1st down here, and you're using the stuff we just got in today, so what the hell? Anything that you store, whether it's dry storage, walk-in, freezer, anything, that should be 6 inches up above the floor. This does two things. It helps with pest management, and on the off chance something does get in there, it'll be a lot harder for that to get in there. Now, I know they can jump or whatever, but it helps. And airflow is the other reason. Keep single-use cups and bowls and stuff like that. Keep that in its original packaging. Don't pull them out because you're more likely to get debris on them. And it's better to store things upside down as well to keep things from like falling into the bowls and the cups. Chemicals are like kryptonite. You don't want to have chemicals anywhere near the food. Easy example, say that you are storing Scotch-Brite packages that you use for the flat top, you know, you squeeze the gel packs, and you keep them in like a Cambro. If you run out of Cambros, you're not allowed to then use that Cambro that you're using for Scotch-Brite and put like chicken in it. Even though the chemicals are in their own packaging, that's like a big no-no. And you don't, also, obviously, you don't want to take like pasta and store it right next to the grill cleaning stuff. Now, let's talk about storage order. Whether you cook or not, I think it's best practice that you should do this in your house too. I'm going to give you a really easy tool to remember, which is swim, walk, fly. Shelf 1, you're going to have ready-to-eat foods. Shelf 2, you're going to have seafood. I don't know why I'm doing this. You know, Shelf 2, you're going to have seafood. Shelf C, things that walk, you're going to have whole cuts of beef and pork, like pork loin, whatever, eye of round, whatever you're going to have. Underneath that, you put ground meat. You don't actually want to have the ground meat sitting above the whole cuts of meat. Ground meat also has to be cooked to a higher temp because of the nature of it being ground and not being sure of like what's inside of it. There's a different cooking temp for steaks and for hamburgers because of this. This actually applies to fish too. So if you have whole fish, then you have like lamb shanks, then underneath that, if you had like ground up raw salmon, I don't know why, maybe you're making salmon burgers, I don't know. That actually goes beneath the lamb. And then beyond that, poultry. Ground poultry would go underneath the ground beef or ground fish, and whole chicken breast will also. The chicken doesn't matter. You can have ground chicken right next to the regular chicken because it all has to be cooked to 165 anyway. This also says that you shouldn't store food in locker rooms, garbage rooms, restrooms, mechanical rooms, unshielded sewer lines, and under stairs. So if you're storing your meat in the restroom, stop storing your meat in the restroom. Okay, I'm not even joking. It says it right there. I don't know if you can read it. It's right here. It specifically tells you not to store food in the restroom. The thing that's funny about this is they wouldn't have put it in here if somewhere along the lines somebody didn't do that. Like, a lot of rules are invented because of people doing things the wrong way, and then they have to make a rule being like, well, you can't do it that way anymore. That's usually how it happens. So at some point, somebody was storing their chicken in like the same area as the garbage or something, or like storing dry pasta like under the stairs or next to the sewer or whatever. Gross, dude. Like people are gross. All right, that's chapter 5. As usual, the study questions are going to be down in the doobly-doo thing, and you can check those out and answer them as you want. As you've noticed, I put the study questions down there. They're only meant to make you think and to look up the answers to these things to help you with the test. So that's why I don't provide the answers, because I want you to be able to like look at the types of questions they ask, get a feel for, ServSafe Manager. This is the type of stuff. For example, you might see something like, what is the correct temperature for receiving cold TCS foods? For chapter 6, what do we got for chapter 6 here? Undercooked meatballs, fatal outbreak, food prepping, thawing, eggs and egg mixtures. It's about 12 pages, thereabout. So look forward to that within the next week or two. Otherwise, I wish you the best on your test and on your journey to becoming a manager. And I hope you have an awesome and amazing day, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.